Hi, and welcome back to Community Hotline. I'm Monica Weitzel. We're here in Gresham at MetroEast Community Media. And now I'm going to be talking with OPAL, Environmental Justice Oregon. And representing OPAL, I have Sean Fleek. It's nice to have you here, Sean.
Thank you for having me.
You are the Community Engagement Coordinator. You're also a member of the Northern Arapaho Tribe. Okay. And I met you originally when you were with NEA, but now you've moved on to OPAL and both
Indeed.
Great organizations. Tell me what exactly you do as a Community Engagement Coordinator. What is the mission of OPAL?
OPAL's mission is to build power for environmental justice and civil rights in our communities. And as Community Engagement Coordinator, I do communications and some fundraising. But I think this is the part of the job that I really like, where I get to speak to people about the work that we do, which is really powerful movement building work in Portland for low-income people and people of color.
How long has this organization been?
We celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year, so 2016 marks 11 years in service.
OPAL's always in the news lately, and I'm going to attribute that to you being the communications or community engagement coordinator, because there's so much going on. It's just a lot of different areas, which makes sense since environmental justice and the issues that you talk about are just varied. Tell me about some of the things that you've been working on lately, or what the organization's been doing.
Definitely. So thanks for noticing that OPAL's out there. We are an organization that builds leadership and then runs campaigns. And so we get low-income people and people of color to identify priorities and then work to get those priorities fixed, whether it's potholes in the streets or bus lines that don't run frequently enough or housing that becomes unaffordable. So currently we're running 2 official full campaigns. One is to get a low-income fare on the TriMet system. Okay. We think that if you make below a certain amount of money, that you should have access to a reduced price fare. And there's also a lot of problems with TriMet's planned transition to an electronic fare system. We see it excluding a lot of low-income riders, and it's going to be less accessible for seniors, people with disabilities. You'll have to walk to a store in order to fill up your electronic fare card.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and so...
can they take the bus to the store?
Right, exactly, right.
Yeah.
So because of these changes, we see this opportunity to create a low-income fare system so that the electronic fare system becomes more accessible to low-income people and people of color.
So how do you find out what's important to the people that you're talking to? Do you have community forums, or how do you do that?
We bring people in and we ask. When we go out on the buses, which we do really regularly, we have First Saturday bus organizing, where our bus organizer Orlando will go out and talk to people on the bus, and it's not just a one-way. We're not just there to get signatures and transactional relationship move along. We really want to talk to people, and we ask them, what is your experience when you ride the bus?
And you listen and
right. I mean, I'm a transit-dependent person. I took the bus out here, and I noticed that the bus is really cramped, especially this time of day. The number 4 bus that runs right up Division is one of the busiest bus lines in the entire city, and it's packed with working-class people trying to get to and from work. It's packed with moms trying to get groceries, carrying a couple of kids, and it's a lot of low-income people and people of color that are dependent upon the transit system. So we ask, what do you want from the transit system? And so our members have long identified that the system is less accessible than they would like it to be, and the low-income fare is building on the victory of the campaign for a fair transfer. We're the people that got you the extra half hour on your transfer.
Nice.
Anybody who rides the bus got an extra half hour at no extra charge. That was because of a campaign that our members identified and then set about advocating for.
So it's really a grassroots sort of organization, isn't it?
Absolutely. What we do, what I'm talking to you about, the campaign for a low-income fare comes directly from the mouths of our membership. I actually wanted another member to be here, but she had another transportation planning committee meeting that she had to be a part of. So our members aren't just working on, this one campaign. We really help people get leadership skills that translate into a world of advocacy.
That's great.
Which leads me to speaking about our other campaign. We have a youth program called the Youth Environmental Justice Alliance, and the youth have identified that in East Portland youth aren't getting the same youth pass that kids in Portland Public Schools are getting.
I read about that.
Right, so this is a campaign you may have seen recently.
Yep,
the
I
youth
sure
were at
did.
Multnomah County advocating for the county to get on board and support expanding free transit access for area high schools to the 2 schools that are in Portland but don't receive the same benefit.
Yeah, it makes no sense, does it? I mean, it really doesn't make any
Indeed,
sense at all.
it's a definite issue of justice, and it's about equity. You know, we in this town we like to talk about equity a lot. We like to say that we care about our marginalized communities, but when it comes time for money to meet those priorities, we always say a budget is a moral document. And when a city or a transit agency or the county puts their budget together, they're making moral decisions.
I would not have thought about it that way.
And
That makes perfect sense.
We truly believe that the equity and the investment in East Portland particularly is key. We see time and again that the marginalized communities that are east of 82nd Avenue get left out of spending priorities. We have a huge portion of the population out here, but not as many of the dollars for transportation infrastructure or housing get invested east of 82nd. And it happens to be where a lot of low-income people, immigrant communities, people of color, and a lot of working-class white families all live, and where we're being pushed because of gentrification.
Yeah, since everything became gentrified in Northeast, I mean, I get it. I can barely afford to, that part of town myself now. It's really changed a lot, and everything has moved out here. So a lot of the social services are moving out here. But there's still a lot that's lacking.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, OPAL, we're called OPAL Environmental Justice Oregon, and a lot of people would hear that and think environment, right? You're another environmental nonprofit.
But it's not just we're not just talking about toxic things in the air and that kind of thing. That's part of it.
We care a lot about air toxics because we care about the human health implications. We care about green spaces because people who have access to green spaces are healthier and engage with nature in a more healthful way and are able to be active and walk through the park instead of having to take their own personal car, right?
So it's more of a holistic approach to the environment.
Right, it's not just about trees and fish, although we love trees and we love fish. It's really about people and about how people interact with their environment that is most important to us.
And OPAL, that's an acronym, right?
Indeed, organizing people, activating leaders, which essentially represents a sort of twofold strategy that we use. We, outside of traditional mainstream organizing, out of government, we have people on the ground, ready to march, ready to write letters. And then on the inside, we have leadership that's actually sympathetic. We have advocates that know us at the county and the city, and they're willing to fight for us. So if you've got, if the decision makers inside are trying to make a decision and they can point out the window at a mass of Bus Riders Unite supporters who are holding up signs that say lower the fare for low-income people, then that's how we make grassroots change happen.
That's great. And there's a lot to be said for learning to do those things. I mean, I imagine a lot of people, you have a lot of volunteers at work.
Indeed. Hundreds of people come through our doors every year to volunteer, to attend political educations, to develop leadership skills, write testimony. There's
so I
a lot of
assume you
activity.
always need more volunteers to get.
Absolutely.
So how do you get your volunteers? Do people come on usually for a particular campaign because something absolutely affects them and means something to them?
Well, one of our elected leaders within Bus Riders Unite, it's a membership organization. People pay dues, and they have yearly elections to vote for who is the leadership of the organization. So there's a 3-person steering committee, and one of the leaders on the steering committee said recently that you come to OPAL for the transit justice, but you stay for the environmental justice.
Really?
So people get involved because we get on the bus and we talk about bread and butter issues like whether or not you can afford transit. But then when people come in and we develop a long curriculum that takes place year round and it changes all the time to be sure that people understand that environmental justice is about racism, sexism, classism, socioeconomic discrimination, and that people not being able to afford transit, that's not just their fault. That's a systemic issue about where investments get made.
Right.
And when people hear that we're not just concerned with individual campaigns, but we're really talking about building a movement so that we can continue to run campaigns, people get excited.
Yeah. Well, one thing affects the other. I mean, it's just everything's so interrelated.
Indeed.
in our society. So any decisions we make, they affect somebody else, and just being able to get that, have an organization that can help you sort of figure out how to fight the injustices.
Indeed.
That's a really powerful thing. Now you mentioned that. I think we had some pictures too. I want to take a look at those.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned fundraising that you do.
Indeed.
So
we have a community event that we do once a year. It's called Voices of a People's History of the United States. And the theme for this year's Voices event is Roots, Resistance, Revolution. So we're going to be talking
Three
about
R's.
Indeed, we're going to be talking about how our communities have roots in our cultures and in really strong ties that we have to one another, and that we're actively resisting a lot of the negative things that are happening to us, whether it's gentrification, whether it's ongoing oppressive systems and how they interact with us, and that we're really building towards a revolution where people are in charge of the decisions that impact them. And we believe that the impacted people, the transit riders, the renters, should be the people to make the decisions about the transit system and about rental policy.
Instead of somebody who's just a politician who has maybe no firsthand knowledge of that situation.
Right. We want decision makers to listen to us, but not just listen, to actively do what we're asking them to do. Environmental justice is about the fair treatment and the meaningful involvement of people in the decision making that impacts them.
Okay. Well, I think this would be a good time to take a look at those pictures, so maybe they can bring them up on the screen for us. Mentioned earlier.
Indeed. So this is a family. We stand in solidarity with the Community Alliance of Tenants and the Portland Tenants Union in declaring a state of emergency.
It is.
And this city has seen record numbers of evictions and climbing rents. And we really want the city and the county and the state to stand together and say, no more. We have to not just look at housing as a for-profit commodity. It's about homes. It's about where people live.
People's lives.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It's about our lives. Transportation is the lifeblood and the glue that kind of connects our society. It wouldn't matter where your house was in relation to your school or your workplace if you could just instantly teleport there.
Yeah,
but you have to get on the bus or you have to use your car, and we want a future that's more sustainable. So we want a transit system that works for everyone. This is a picture of our deputy director, Vivian Satterfield, and she was one of the readers at last year's Voices of the People's History of the United States event. It's a really lovely evening. It's community leaders of all stripes. We're just about to announce the names of our speakers this year, but Ray Espana from the NEA Family Center, Family Center will be there. Katrina Holland, the director of the Community Alliance of Tenants, will be there. A lot of really inspiring folks from the social justice movement locally. Ben Duncan, Chris Winter will be reading historic speeches and essays by movement leaders in the past. Wow. So Voices is really an opportunity for us to realize that the organizing that we do nowadays is really, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Right. We wouldn't be where we are without Cesar Chavez, without Martin Luther King, without Harvey Milk, without the men and women who have had the courage to speak up in the past and say there was an injustice and something needed to be done about it.
So 20 years from now, when you're having your 25th whatever Voices fundraiser, maybe some of the people that are working there now that you say, hey, we're standing on their shoulders because they made a difference.
Definitely.
Because people they're making a difference.
Definitely. So this is a great infographic that comes to us from The Nation magazine, just to really understand what environmental racism looks like. This is specifically in regard to where toxic waste and air pollution happens. We know that here in Portland, your race is a huge determining factor in whether you get to breathe clean air. Just coming down Division, I went through the Jade district. The Jade is a box of a few census tracts that are majority people of color, and it's boxed in by transportation corridors. And some of the worst air quality in our city happens in that area just because I-205, Division, 82nd Avenue, and Foster Powell are essentially these huge traffic corridors that are just constantly emitting noxious fumes, diesel particulate, and everything else that comes out of the tailpipe of your car comes from the brakes. And we recognize that there's a real environmental racism at work there. And so we're hoping to address those types of systemic inequities through drawing attention to them, organizing the people that it's actually happening to, and then getting our city, county, state, local, federal governments to invest in ameliorating those problems.
That's a big job. It's a big job.
Indeed.
So
I don't think there's any danger that we'll be out of work anytime soon.
No, I don't think so either.
The systemic racism, but
there's going to be one thing after another that you can work on. That's for sure.
Indeed, whether it's Portland's current and ongoing air toxics crisis, which honestly stretches back 20 years of data showing that particularly low-income communities and communities of color have been impacted by air toxics. It's the ongoing housing crisis, which we've known for a long time. Portland has had a homelessness problem. There are houseless people all over Portland that have been ignored. And now it's actually starting to chip away at some middle-income earners' ability to stay put. And now people are really starting to feel the crunch.
Yeah, they are. They are. I see that a lot. I personally see it a lot. And it's, so it's not just it's just not one group's problem. It's all of our problems, because that
Indeed.
affects all of us. So.
Indeed. It's about the quality of life in Portland,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
a myth that Portland is this very green and very white city, but it turns out in the parts of Portland that aren't very white, Portland is not very green. And there are reasons behind that that aren't just incidental. You know, there's a long history of
They're
white
not
supremacy,
they're not very pretty, are
settler
they?
colonialism
Yeah.
that lead to what it looks like where
we
you
have,
live.
We have some ugly history. We actually do, and
Indeed.
that's too bad. But we can fight to change it. We're just about out of time, Sean. So tell us a little bit. The Voices of People's History.
Yes.
That is on June 22nd
At the Curious Comedy Theater.
on MLK.
On MLK, and we would invite community members who are interested in being inspired by community leaders and hearing some of the famous words that have led the social justice movement.
Sounds like a really inspiring evening.
It's a really awesome event.
Yeah.
I went to my first Voices event last year just as I had joined the staff at OPAL, and I really felt like I had found an ideological home because I was watching some of the most inspiring young people and community elders who have been fighting for justice for a long time in Portland really speak to some of the biggest challenges that this country and the world have faced. And Voices is definitely a really special time.
Wow.
People can buy tickets on our website at opalpdx.org/voices.
Great, super. Well, we are out of time. So thank you, Sean Fleek, that you are doing a great job, it sounds like, as a community engagement coordinator, and I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, Monica.
You bet. And do stick around. We have a bit more of Community Hotline coming up. Check out OPAL on their website, attend their fundraiser, and just find out more about how you can impact your community and become a leader in social and environmental justice as well. I'm Monica Weitzel. Stick around. We'll be right back.
My documentary was more than I ever would have dreamed of doing.
This is a community media station.
It was phenomenal.
Ready, camera one.
What is it about this place that makes so many different people come together?
Ready, camera two.
Very professional, experienced people.
You can use these industry standard pieces of equipment.
Ready, camera three. Take three.
To be rich to do this.
Open people's eyes to something they've never even thought of before.
Cool stuff happens. It becomes this community.
That's going to really change who's telling the stories and who's controlling the messaging.